To start.
Hi.
Erev Tov. Okay, so we started last week the laws of we started last week the laws of Yom Tov. Let's just make sure that the recording is on as well. Okay, let's bring up the text. So we're holding chapter 98 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Let's bring up the page. We're holding, I believe, law number 3. Okay. Okay, so we're holding the law. It says like this. Again, Yom Tif we're going to learn, there's a whole tractate Beitza that deals with the laws of Yom Tif. It's in ways it's a lot more difficult, and that's where Rebecca was pushing that we learn Hilchos Yom Tif. In ways it's a lot more difficult in some ways, the laws of Yom Tif than the laws of Shabbos, because you're allowed to do certain things. It creates a complication about what you can and what you can't do, and when you can do it, and in what circumstances you can do it. With Shabbos, is a lot less that you could do, so therefore you're not allowed to cook, you're not allowed to do any melachos. All the forbidden, all the forbidden 39 melachas of jobs or doings or things that you can't do on Shabbos are prohibited. And if it's not, then it's either a rabbinic definition of certain things that you can and cannot do. There's other things that are not exactly malachas, like where you're allowed to speak on Shabbos, where you're allowed to do all the things we learned about, and how you're supposed to spend your Shabbos. Yom Tov has all the energy of Shabbos, so to say, in its own way. It's Yom Tov is about Simcha, Shabbos is about Rina, but at the same time, it has the 39 malachas. It has the 39 things, acts that you're not allowed to do apply to Yom Tov. But there's a verse it says, Ach, asher ye'echel l'chol nefesh, whatever is food related, you can do. So it's not that you say, okay, these are the things you can do, these are the things you cannot do. In theory, there's the all 39 malachas, all the 39 acts that you can't do on Shabbos, you cannot do on Yom Tov. But then there's a verse that says, however, anything that's connected to food, it's permissible. And because of that, there's a machlekes in the Mishnah. How far does that go? By the house of Hill, house of Shammai. Like we learned, if you could carry for food, could you carry for not food? If your fire is only food related, when can you do it? But because all the acts are really prohibited, it's just that there's a loophole when it comes to food, and therefore we make an exception to the rule of Shabbos on Yom Tov. And therefore on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do things that are food related. We always have to analyze in every situation if this is something that's included in this loophole, meaning to say, is it just that all things are allowed, or things that are connected to Simchas Yom Tov, that eating the meal of Yom Tov in a happy way, that has to be done through cooking, etc. But if there's things that could be done before Yom Tov, like we're going to learn now, so then the prohibitions of Shabbos apply then there too. It means if there's foods that could be done or work that could be done prior to Yom Tov, you can't do it on Yom Tov. You can't push it off to Yom Tov. And there's different reasons for that. One reason is because the prohibitions really stand. It's just that it's been pushed aside for the ability to make food. And the other thing is also the rabbis didn't want that a person should spend their whole Yom Tiv, like people have in America. It's a custom. You have Saturday off and you have Sunday off. So you have one day you're going to spend cleaning your yard and your garage and your car, and then the next day you're going to go out. So they didn't want that a person should use Yom Tov as a day to clean your garage and do things. Because you say, oh, it's permissible, so I'm going to push it off to Yom Tov. And even not for the Moed, even not for the Chol Moed. So therefore, they want it to be a day of Simcha. And part of the Simcha is the food, but not that you should put everything off. So therefore, we come to law number 3. Law number 3 says as follows. Tavlin she'im yitchan oisam koidim Yom Tov yafigu tamim. Let's say you have spices, that if you're going to grind them before Yom Tov, Erev Yom Tov, they're going to lose flavor because they won't be as sharp or as potent. Mutter leduchan b'Yom Tov aydei shinoi. So then you could do it on Yom Tov, but you should do it not the regular way, through a shinoi, through an unconventional way. Okay, so here we see again that if you could have done it before Yom Tov and it would have no effect on the taste, you should do it before. But if you can't, because it's going to taste much better, so you could do it, but do a shinui again, because we're pushing away the prohibitions of the acts, to make space for you to have the best experience in Yom Tov and fresh food, but to limits. Kegoin, for instance, he says, what does it mean, unconventional way? Kegoin shiyates as a machteshes litstadin. So it means such as including inclining the mortar to its on its side, means not exactly using it the regular way. Or you pound it on the table, which again, these are not your regular ways of doing it. You can't just do it in the grinder. So, for instance, on Yom Tov, electricity to go use an electric grinder on Yom Tov is not allowed. V'chein tamcha. Tamcha is horseradish. Chrein. It's interesting. He writes it here, hey, Aaron, chrein, which is the horseradish that we use for, let's say, people use it for fish or other things. Shagar noise ala moirag, that Riv Eisen. So the horseradish, he says that is granted on a hand grater. So he says may not be grated into a dish. Lo yigrar l'toich chayra kedarka b'chol. How you do in the week? Why do you do the horseradish on Yom Tov? Because everyone knows horseradish loses its potency every day, right? If you make the maror for Pesach, too early, it's not going to be strong. You want it to be strong. So people, part of, today, chrein, one of the signs of a good kosher kitchen or a good kosher cook, he or she, is how well do you make the chrein, right? The chrein has to be most people, at least back in the Haim, like they say, back at home in Europe, right? The chrein was not like today. Americans like chrein sweet. Those days, chrein was a sharp. Is a sharp. When I go to the stores till today, that's what I grew up with. I buy chrein that doesn't have sugar inside. So it's supposed to be strong and potent. So therefore you could do it on Yom Tov itself, but you don't do it the regular way. El alamapa, do it on the tablecloth. The coffee also. What about coffee? Right? If you want to grind your coffee on Yom Tov, ein litchem b'rchaim. You should not use a grinder to grind your beans on Yom Tov. El yiduchem b'medoicha v'aydei shinui. So how should you do it? So you should do it, pound it with a mortar in an unconventional manner. Again, if you can do it before Yom Tov and it's fresh, right? Those who do go, if you do it yourself, or you go to Starbucks, what have you, you have it in your vacuum packed thing. So that's better, of course. It says, what's the bottom line? Anything you can do before Yom Tov, do before Yom Tov. Now, if you say I don't want to do it before Yom Tov because it's not going to taste as good, so then you're in the right to push it off. But just because you're lazy or because you can't be bothered or because you're busy, that's not enough of an excuse. What about things that don't lessen their flavor by making them early? Then surely you have to make sure to deal with it before Yom Tov, not to push it off the Yom Tov. So here we see again that we're pushing the law. Means we haven't dropped the law, even though we said last week that even shehutra, once it became permissible, the carrying is permissible, but the actual work itself, each thing that you're looking at, see, carrying is carrying, but each thing that you're looking at, we look at are you pushing it off to Yom Tov, or you can do it before Yom Tov, or it's best to be done in Yom Tov? Like for instance, there's a lot of dishes. I think Aaron was saying that you like to cook the lasagna night before; it tastes better. So that's again each person to their taste. Yes, Rebecca.
I was just gonna say, like, it's not only cooking. Like, you can carry without an eruv on Yom Tov that you can't do on Shabbos, and also, um, I think like a Rav here told me that it's okay to shower in warm water, not hot water, but warm water on Shabbos, and even to wash hair on Shabbos,
Yom
just
Tov.
not to wring it.
Yom
On sorry, on Yom Tov, just not to wring it out. And I think you can like give a baby a warm bath on Yom Tov. There's like, I'm sure there's lots of other things that you could do on Yom Tov that you can't do on Shabbos. So it's like, it's not only food, it's other things too. That's why it's so confusing.
Yes, so you're right, but everything was based on food. Everything and Simchas Yom Tov. I don't want to go into the showers now. I don't want to open up that conversation because showers and Yom Tov we'll get to. We'll discuss it soon when we get to the right time. But I want to give an example. We said in Law 1, we have this is based on Beis Hillel in Masechtas Beitza. the laws, the tractate of Beitza that deals with the laws of Yom Tov. It says, it comes talking about carrying, that things that were permitted because of food related became permitted even if it's not food related, but it has to have a certain, it has to have some sort of purpose. Like we spoke about the Yartzeit candle. So fire and carrying, right? You don't. It's like, for instance, those who smoke, you're allowed to smoke on Yom Tov from an existing flame. So there's you're allowed to light a candle from an existing flame. It's not just for the food, even though Shabbos you can't light the candle. If even for light in the house, right? If your lights go off on Shabbos, you can't light candles on Shabbos. But on Yom Tov you can. So why? Because once it's permitted for Ochel Nefesh, it's a machlokas. It's not a clear thing. It's a machlokas b'sham b'sil, but the law is like b'sil, that because it was permitted for food, it's permitted for non-food. But that's why carrying is allowed. But that's again, once it's actually been permitted to do this carrying, therefore it's been permitted to do the carrying that may be not food related. But to the actual laws themselves, like this malacha right now, can you do it? Can't you do it? So we have to see if it's something that could be done in Yom Tov, do it on Yom Tov. If it's something that can only be done in Yom Tov, where it's best if it's done on the day, then you could do it on the day. If not, you have to do it earlier. Again, part of it is the malacha, and part of it is simchas Yom Tov. You shouldn't be spending your whole time in the kitchen if you could prepare before. Jonathan, please, a question related to what we're learning now.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. We're talking about cooking and everything. I was just wondering. All right, I'll get to the point. All right, here. Right. So how come? All right, bishul or cooking has to be one of the malachas. All right. And why couldn't it be permitted? Right. Thinking, that what do you call it? It's an essential need in life. So why does that have to be? Why do you have to go through all the malachas and all the laws and all the regulations of cooking and bishul and stuff?
Okay, so
Why
this
should
is
it be permitted?
so that's a general question on Shabbos. Why is it prohibited to be cooked on Shabbos? Shabbos, the Torah said you have to rest. The way you go into Shabbos is the way Shabbos is going to be. Your food has to be prepared. Everything has to be prepared, and it's because it doesn't have the extra requirement of simcha. So it's not like it's okay to, first of all, the Jewish people became very, like in every situation, it's not just the Jewish people. Every society becomes very resourceful when you have limitations. No limits actually is not such a good thing, right? When every day you could decide you have an option of 1,000 things to eat and you could eat anything you want. People, the great delis in America came about because of recession, right? So not everyone could afford steak. So they started to improvise hot dogs, salami, cold cuts. That was cheaper cuts for people that wanted to eat meat and couldn't afford it. There's many kind of dishes that come to light because when you're under a certain pressure, so you have to figure it out. Same thing's cholent, right? Everyone loves cholent. Cholent is a figure. You can only make cholent on Shabbos. Why? Because it was made around the laws and restrictions of Shabbos. So Shabbos Hashem wants us to rest and spend. The main thing is Shabbos is supposed to be a day la Hashem for God, and you're supposed to rest. So therefore, you could figure it out. You try to have warm food if you can. If you can't have warm food, then I don't know who this is. Ariel? Did you invite someone that we don't know?
Yes, I did. Yes, yes, yes. My friend Daniel. Yes, it's my friend. Yes.
Okay. So then you have so then you so then but that's the difference in Yom Tov and Shabbos. Yom Tov it was permitted clearly. It's not a rabbinic. The Torah says the things that are related to food are permitted for Yom Tov, and that's not permitted on Shabbos. So you're saying bishul is essential. You could cook before Shabbos. But that's what Shabbos is. Shabbos is don't do fire, don't do malacha, don't do work. Sit there and do rest, Shabbos, to rest. Everyone knows. Listen, the fact is that once you learn Shabbos and you get involved in Shabbos, it's amazing. It's amazing not to have to cook on Shabbos. I'll be honest with you. It's very nice to have fresh food on Yom Tov. I help out in the kitchen sometimes, right? So if I help out in the kitchen sometimes, to me it's a pressure to have to come home and make the cholent, to have to come home and make the meat or whatever it is I'm helping out in. So it's great that it's fresh and everyone loves the foods on Yom Tov, but there's also a certain toil in it because instead of sitting there and studying Torah and sitting in shul, you're worrying about the foods. But that's what you're supposed to be worried about the food. That's what Yom Tov is about, but not Shabbos. So I hear your question, Jonathan. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's the way it is. Okay, let's continue. So go ahead. What do you say, Jonathan? I'm listening. What do you say?
You did answer my question, right? Not a bad answer. You did
Okay,
good.
thank you. So now he says, "Ach." So okay, so he's again, "Vade tzrichim lizal duchim erev Shabbos." Things that don't lose its potency, try to do it before Yom Tov. However, im shachach, let's say it's not something that's essential to be done on Yom Tov. Whatever, it's not chrein, it's not spices, salt. Those who crush their salt or those who crush their peppers is a spice. So im shachach, if you forgot, yesh lahatir gam ken adishinu. So forgetfulness, you don't punish someone who forgets. So you could do it even if it could have been done before. You could do it, but do it in a non-conventional way. But you have to be careful when if something you could have done before Yom Tov and something that you forgot, so you can't. It's not. We have the rule in Yom Tov that once you're cooking, you could cook a mass. You could cook more. If you don't have to be exact. But if it's something you should have done before Yom Tov and you forgot, so you can't mash the salt or whatever it is you're doing for tomorrow. If 2 days Yom Tov, you can only do what you need today. And you should be and after tomorrow. You should be more careful. Right? Let's say it's at night. The night entering Yom Tov. And whatever it is you could have done before Yom Tov, you didn't. You forgot. So you can't even say, okay, I'm going to need the same thing tomorrow. I may as well do double. No. There's some people who are more careful. Just do what you need right now. And before the next meal, do again. Even though seemingly it makes more effort and maybe more time consuming, but it's kind of keeping the boundaries of the law. V'gam b'dichas matzah, we'll see in the footnote, but also grinding matzah mill, right? Matzah mill is a big part of a Jewish diet, right? Matzah mill is used for many things, right? Kishkas and not telling people how to cook, and some people use it for frying schnitzel. So medichas matzah, he means to say breaking the matzah for matzah mill. Yesh lizar b'zeh, should also be careful about not overdoing it. Now again, matzah mill also could fall under the category of fresh, because when you grind it the day before, it's not as fresh as if you've grinded it if you made matzah mill the day before, the day of. Okay, let's see the footnotes. So we're talking about the doing it on the tablecloth. The Chai Adam 83.3 Mishnah Berurah 504.19 says that you should do it. We're talking about the horseradish, the chrein. You may not grind it in a grinding mill, even in an unusual manner. Means even in an unusual manner in a grinding mill, you should be more careful. For it's uvda the chol. It's the way you would do things in the week, which is forbidden even in an unconventional fashion. So we see that there's a general rule of the Magen Avram 5047. So we see that the Magen Avram, who's machmir, they say that the Alter Rebbe, whose birthday is coming up next week, who wrote the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So he says that he was very saimach on the Magen Avram. He used the Magen Avram a lot in his rulings. And later he kind of, I don't want to say the word regretted it, but he said maybe he would have liked to have not used the Magen Avram so much for his rulings. But the Magen Avram over here is more careful and says that even in an unconventional way, in a grinder, you shouldn't do it. So like on the tablecloth. So what do we see? That we don't, even though things are permissible on Yom Tov, but it doesn't mean you can just do everything you want in any way you want. Okay, what are we talking about over here? You may not grind coffee with a grinder, not even in an unconventional manner. So says the Panim Meirois. Again, coffee also. Coffee today, some people are are religious about their coffee and some people less. So, today you could buy instant coffee. That's one thing. Today you could buy pre-ground coffee, but you have the religious, very high-end coffee drinkers that are very careful about every single part of the element of coffee makes a difference to their experience. So he says you can't do it in a grinder. You have to do it in an unconventional way. I don't know how if you can really gain anything by trying to break the coffee beans in an unconventional way, but I guess each person, the coffee drinker, will have to make that decision. Yes, Rebecca.
Can you use a French press on Yom Tov? Do you know what that is?
Yeah. The small guys that you put in the flour, the beans, whatever, the ground beans, and you push it down.
Yeah.
That would be a question of boirer, and I don't think I think that would be okay. That's because that's the way you do it. And also you can't do it before. I don't want to paskin straight up, but I know it's even discussed on Shabbos. We don't do it on Shabbos, but it's discussed on Shabbos. So I'm assuming Yom Tov it wouldn't be a problem at all. You're not grinding it. That's the way you make it. And also like a cold brew. For instance, to make a cold brew, on Yom Tov for the next day, you're not allowed to do these things. You have to. That's what you have to be. As I said, Yom Tov is very hard because you think you could do everything, and not always you can. It says, what are we talking about over here? Foods that do not lose their flavor certainly should be done before Yom Tov. This is a rabbinical ordinance, so that Yom Tov is not spent working in the kitchen. Okay, this is like I said before. There's two things over here. One thing is the malacha aspect of it, and the other thing is this time thing. Like, don't the Yom Tov is not supposed to be. You're not. It's not a mitzvah to be in the kitchen. It's a mitzvah to have a nice meal. If you could do it earlier, do it earlier. Do it on Erev Yom Tov or the day before. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, two things. You mentioned cold brew. I have a cold brewer that is so not electric. You make it and you stick it in the refrigerator, and it just sits there for those many hours, and then you lift it up and it's separated. Next is, can some of these things that could be automated that you mentioned you can't do, you could put it on a timer. Just give you an example, coffee. There are coffee makers that you set it and then it brings the grinds to the grinder, grinds it, and then puts it into the area where it will brew it. Are those things allowed?
Yeah, hold on. Walk me back and start from the beginning. The cold brew. What was the question on the cold brew?
My cold brew maker is so unelectric. There
Hmm.
is not one piece of electronics in it. It's basically a place to hold your grinds in the water and then easily take them out of the water, and you have your cold brew. But you put it in the refrigerator and you leave it there for 10 to 24 hours. Are you
Does it
allowed to?
get does it get ruined? Does it get ruined if you make it too early?
It just gets stronger. So it
Okay.
depends on how what strength you like.
But no, what about if you took out the beans Erev Yom Tov and just left it in the fridge as is, as a drink, as a
Well,
liquid?
eventually you're going to do that. That's the end result. You'll take out the beans and leave it in the
And,
refrigerator.
and how long do you leave it? Could you leave it in the fridge for?
It doesn't last that long. People drink it, but like you could leave it for a couple of days, like you would any drink, like tea, like iced tea.
If it could say, I'll be honest with you, if it could last a couple of days and it's just as good, seemingly you should do this whole experience before Yom Tov.
Okay.
Especially based on footnote number 19, where we're talking about the point of not just spending your whole morning in the kitchen. So that's for sure. And the second question you had about the electric grinder that's on a setting.
And also any of the malakas that you said we couldn't do, but you could set it on a timer.
Okay, so that's a good. The question is going to be from two perspectives. If the problem is like footnote number 19, where you're spending your time in the kitchen, possibly, I don't want to say right away, possibly, then it would be allowed because you preset the settings and it doesn't affect your Yom Tov time, right? But if the
Nothing.
Yeah, but if the point is that you're grinding it on Yom Tov, you're setting it to be grind on Yom Tov, and you could have done it before Yom Tov, and it doesn't affect the quality of the material. So then it would be a question if a timer that's set for, and it's its conventional way, you could set that on Yom Tov. If you could have done it before Yom Tov, that I have to check.
Okay, let me just say this. If you're just using coffee as an example,
I want to get before you continue. I just want to say one thing. When it's come to the laws of Yom Tov, we're going to have to put a lot of questions on pause to check because, like I said, there's a lot of these. All these details are difficult. I don't want to just say something that's not 100% accurate. So I hear you.
correct.
You have a
No,
good question. You have a good question on the grinding one. Again, if depending on if it's not if it's not if it's not as good if it was done Erev Yom Tov, it's in a whole nother situation. I would assume would be allowed. But even
but
if
let me just say this to
I
you.
continue,
If you have two people making the exact same coffee, one person's going to taste it differently than the other person. So one may say it has to be done exactly the time you're going to drink it. And someone's going to say, okay, a few hours for the yontif, it tastes fine. It's pretty good and I can live
okay,
with it.
yeah. So that question gets really discussed about, do we go after the roiv? What most people do, like people get obsessed. Do we have to cater to the obsessed drinker? The one who's like extremely particular, or is it each person the way they know their situation? So that's something in Yom Tov that's also discussed, that we have to get to how we define what's needed and what's considered good and what's considered regular. That which is a good question. Again, the problem with the machine grinding is that a lot of things have to be checked. For instance, the machine itself has to be checked. If any electronics get turned on or lights get turned on, or gets triggered by emptying out the grinder once it's grind on an alarm. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm in a shul. I used to make chont in the shul. So you don't want the crock pot running. Let's say it's 3 days Yom Tov, right? Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, right? So you make the chant on Friday morning or Friday afternoon. You don't want the crock pot running from Wednesday evening, because first of all, it could break the pot if it's empty. Second of all, it's just a waste of electricity. So you have today these 7-day, 24-hour Shabbos clocks, meaning the old Shabbos clocks just ran on a 24-hour cycle. So then that doesn't help you much. But if you have a 7-day one, which is they have today, which basically you could set that the electricity turns on Friday at 11 o'clock in the morning. So you set it on Wednesday, and the crock pot only goes on Friday, and you go down at that time. You're allowed to do that on Yom Tov. You're allowed to set it up that the crock pot kicks in, the electricity turns on automatically by on Yom Tov. And Shabbos also you have a Shabbos clock. So that the idea of having a Shabbos clock running the ground mill itself shouldn't be a problem. The problem would be, of course, if you have to check the machine itself, if it causes anything when you unload it or load it, for that matter, that would be effective. And also, of course, if it's something that could have been done before. Rebecca, you have your hand up. Is that a question? Yeah, go
Yeah. I
ahead.
have a question. Can you make a barbecue and grill like chicken and meat, which only tastes good fresh, if you use like a kosher flame to light the grill?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Barbecue on Yom Tov is allowed. If you want to do that on Yom Tov, a lot of people do that. If you, I mean, again, you have to remember, you have to have all the rules. So you're not allowed to set a fire, but if you have a pre-existing flame, and you could, and a lot of the gas grills today, you could just turn on the gas and put a match to it. That's fine. But you have to remember, you can't extinguish the fire, so you have to leave it running till Shabbos.
But you could turn off the gas.
You can't, that's turning off the fire. That's psik of leyamas. You can't go to the gas switch and turn it off, and then automatically the fire goes off. That's putting out a fire.
And just
Well,
say this: my my family, my wife's family, they do with charcoal because then they can just let it burn out,
yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
they
what I
bring
was
a
gonna
flame.
ask.
yeah.
Because
Charcoal's allowed. You could, if you have a pre-existing flame. Again, we're going to learn setting a fire. You can't do everything conventional. Getting yourself dirty with the coal. All these things should be. It has to be done in a shinoi. It can't be. It's not typical. But surely everyone knows. No one wants to eat barbecue from yesterday. I mean, people do it as leftovers, but it's not your preferred barbecue is to eat it fresh. So yeah, for 100% that there's a preference that if you could do it, and then you want to leave the flames Aaron says, the flames, the coals to run out. That's fine. Again, I'm just telling you, if you turn on the gas, you can't turn it off. Like any gas stove, you can't turn off on Yom Tov, and you can't turn it down either. So like if you want to leave it running, if you have a gas thing, you can maybe have it like a slow grill and just leave the flame. But again, you have kids, you don't want to to put yourself in a situation where you say, oh, now it's dangerous for my children or dangerous for children that are around. That's also not a chachma to start something to make a problem. Okay, so let's see, footnote number 20. We're talking about the matzah mill. It's interesting. He mentions the matzah mill quite a bit in the law. So it seems like those days matzah mill was a big question. It was a big part of the diet. The matzah is made from ground flour. Okay, when we're grinding the matzah. So he says the matzah is made from ground flour, and you are permitted to grind something that was previously ground, even in the usual manner. So the Mishnah Berurah says, so he says like this. It's interesting, chap. The matzah is made from ground flour, right? You grind to make the flour. Now you have the matzah, so it's not like you're taking a complete thing and grinding it and doing something new, which wasn't done before. Because the matzah's main product is the flour and it's been already grinded, it's regrinding, and therefore it can be done in the usual manner. You could do the matzah in the usual manner. So says the Mishnah Berurah, though the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says you should be careful. Okay. not to grind it more than you need for that meal. So you should only grind the matzah you need for that meal if you're doing it on the Yom Tov itself. Really, you're eating ice cream. It's getting everyone hungry over here. Okay, let's go. Aser levakesh eitz levakeya eitzim ayafilu leshabram biyad. You can't chop wood or to even break the wood with your hand, even if you want to make a fire. Why? Because of course you could have done that before. You also can't pick up this another question because there's again what comes around Yom Tov a lot is also the issue of muksa of things that you've planned, haven't planned. If you want to use things, you have to pre-prepare it. So you can't if it's been set aside before Yom Tov. Like for instance, the halacha goes into if you're going to do slaughtering on Yom Tov. Let's say you're going to slaughter, you can do shechita. We said you're allowed to do shechita, and the halacha doesn't accept today's narrative that aged meats, or at least it says that fresh meat is the best. So in chayis, if you're going to do an animal that needs kisi adam, you have to have prepared dirt that's going to be set aside. So there's a lot of things that have to be prepared. So if you have lelakit eitzim is also a problem. The problem is if it's not gathered, pre-gathered, it means you set it aside that I'm going to use this. Also, you have to remember in the laws of Bates again, it gets complicated. If you want to go to your chickens and say I'm going to slaughter a chicken on Yom Tov, you have to decide before Yom Tov. Say because you could do that before Yom Tov. This chicken I'm going to have tomorrow. So also the wood, you can't just go collecting wood because those woods we're not ready for shot. We're not ready for Yom Tov. Now, let me see. Hold on. Julie, I'm going to get to your message in a second. Let me see. It's in front of me here. Let's see. Says Rabbi Chabad in San Antonio says ground coffee is kosher with cinnamon, but not all cinnamon is kosher. Is that right? Also, the chrein from Macedonia is not okay. It's not. Let's see. How do I see the whole thing? Okay, I'm missing something here. Julie, you want to ask your question in person?
Yeah, so there's a brand that the rabbi said almost all the coffee is kosher, but then if you buy a different cinnamon, it's maybe not.
That's a question of kosher. That's not a question of Yom Tov. That's a question of different products have to have kosher. If they have in it ingredients that are not kosher, that's another challenge.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
Okay. So I'm saying that you have to. That's in the laws of kosher. But in general, coffee is something that if the coffee is kosher, again, coffee is discussed also because they cook the beans and all that. Okay, they roast the beans. Okay, let's do so. You can't gather wood from places if it's spread out all over the place. It means if you're not going to break it, you're just going to burn it as is. Okay, so he says, I'm not sure what's going on over here. Okay, so footnote number 22. If the logs are too large to use for fuel, you may cut them with a knife or by hand. Okay, so if you're not allowed to chop wood, but if you have logs, but the logs themselves are too large to burn, so then you could, it's obviously an unconventional way. So it says the Shulchan Aruch 5011. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, if for some reason my looks like the internet is not strong, so if for whatever reason it goes off, let me know. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch refers to such wood that can be burned for fuel as is. So the Shulchan Aruch is saying you shouldn't split the wood. It means because you can use the wood as is. So seemingly the footnote's basically saying that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch is not arguing on the Shulchan Aruch. He's just talking about a different scenario. See Shulchan Aruch 5012. It is prohibited because it's a bother. What's the problem? Why can't you split the wood? Because you should have done it before. It's a bother to do it on Yom Tov. Cutting small pieces like matchsticks is a melacha dairaisa of grinding. So Alter Rebbe says that, again, this could have done before, that to break into small pieces is like grinding the wood, and that's biblical, not allowed. That says the Alter Rebbe based on the Taz. 24 says, gather wood from the place is, in other words, in your yard. You can't go to your yard that's branches all over the place from the fall and gather wood to make a fire, because it appears as though you are doing it for your weekday needs. If they are scattered in the field, gathering them, is a melacha deraisa of ma'amar gathering. You may not take wood from a field even if it's not scattered. This is the rabbinical prohibition. Lets you gather scattered wood. So says the Shulchan Aruch Rav. So we see that the Alter Rebbe is very careful, and the Shulchan Aruch takes this opinion that there's two opinions. One is to take wood from your yard, not from your woodshed. So that's a rabbinic, but to gather wood that's spread out, that's the Raisa, he says. Just let me see. Hold on, Aaron, I just want to see this again. Again, why all these things could have done before Yom Tov, therefore it's not permitted to be done on Yom Tov itself. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, before I moved to New York, I was in St. Louis, Missouri. It's common from the winter time or just before, a guy would come and he say, "Do you want wood for your fireplace?" So they know because they see your smokestack. Okay, so now he'll bring it. We never had a shed, so he would bring it and put it in a neat pile, and make like a rectangle worth of wood. And if it was going to rain, you could put like a tarp over it. But if it wasn't, you just left it there. Could you take wood from there?
Yeah, that's because that's his place. It's like a shed. Putting it outside your in your backyard, stocked up. That's to take and just to throw it into the fire and Yom Tov if you're allowed. The prohibition over here is three things. One thing he says is splitting the wood, the big logs. In footnote number 22, he explains splitting the big logs into small logs. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch said it's forbidden because you could just use the logs as is. Number two is to break by hand. He adds is also prohibition in the situation of cutting small sticks is biblical of grinding. And the third one he talks about gathering wood. The gathering in your yard is the rice is biblical, and if just taking from your yard is rabbinic because it looks like you're gathering. But if you have it set in its shed and it's not just out there, that's something totally different.
No, but it is out there.
No,
It's
but it's
not under anything. It's just a
no,
square.
yeah, but it's been in Yom Tov. There's a thing called designated space. It doesn't mean you have to have it in your house. If it's a designated space, not just taking it from, what does it mean taking it from your yard? Not be that it's in the yard. It's that it's you're just picking it up. Even if you're not gathering, you're just picking up. But I mean, let me just check it again to make sure that maybe you're right. But I don't. He doesn't say that. If you're scattered in the fields of rice, you may take wood you may not take wood from a field, even if it's not scattered. Field doesn't mean your backyard by your garage or by your outside door. That's where it's supposed to be. That's where people keep the wood. That's for sure. That's allowed. We're talking about going to your field and picking up a piece of wood that you saw. So you're not
So
gathering
you're
all the
saying if one tree dropped a bunch of branches and I want to use them for kindling, I can't.
yeah, no, that you can't. But the thing is this one of the things at Yom Tov we're going to see that it has to be if before Yom Tov you position something, a lot of things, not just wood, sand, other things, animals that you want to slaughter. If you make a mental note, this is what I'm using for Yom Tov. So then it becomes, that's not muksa. The laws of muksa are much more complicated in Yom Tov. Then it's been already preset aside for Yom Tov use. When the person comes and stocks your wood, it's set that you're going to use it. You know you're going to use it. It's not like you're going to your yard because you happen to see a piece of wood that you want to throw it in.
Got it.
It has to be set aside for this use specifically. Understand? That's different than
Yeah.
just in your backyard. Someone put a message. Let me just see what it is.
It's about coffee.
Oh, back to the coffee. Hold on. My
That
computer.
that all coffees.
Whoever put it, please read because my computer's not handling the messaging.
How do we read it? They come and they go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, Z says a lot of coffee have different koshers, certified verifications. Are you okay, etc. Okay, yeah. Again, thank you, Z. But again, this is off topic. This is about kosher. It's not about the laws of Yom Tov. So let's put a pin on that. When we get to the laws of kosher, we'll discuss. Okay. Kishuhu oirach esa eitzim alavonim lahavreish. This has been the question really about the barbecue, right? The same idea. When you're positioning your wood to make a fire, aser mishum da oil. You can't position it properly because then you'd be making an oil, a tent. You're not allowed to make a tent on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So if you make it like on top of the stones, you're making an underspace. That's a problem. Because then you're building like there's walls, separate walls, and you're roofing it. So that's not allowed.
So you couldn't you okay. So if you knew it was going to rain that day, you might before it rains put a tarp over your wood. On Yom Tov, that's not allowed.
No, again, making an oil. I think we learned the laws already in Shabbos as well. I, for instance, have in my backyard, we have a backyard. So in our backyard, in here in Israel, we have an awning that comes, it's very sunny. The Jerusalem sun is extremely, Baruch Hashem, very strong. The sun is a blessing, sometimes annoying. So when it comes down very strong, so you have an awning. We learned that an awning that's been partially opened, you can extend it. But to open the awning totally on Shabbos is not allowed. So you're not allowed to totally open up, create a new space on Shabbos. So by covering it, if to open up, like for instance, if you have a table umbrella, yeah, if it's not, you can't totally open it on Shabbos. It's creating an oil. That applies to Yom Tov as well. So no, you can't just take cover something on Shabbos. Now the question oil really means a tent. That's why if you look at his wording over here, so you have wood on top of the stones. The problem, why is he saying wood on top of the stones? He's not just telling us how to make a fire, because the stones and the wood create underspace. Oil has to have, by definition, a tent is not exactly covering. A tent is creating a space. So if you just take a towel and put it on top of something, it's not a tent. You're just covering something. It's not the same thing. Instead, you take a towel and put it on top or on top of the wood, there's no open space. And in the laws of oil, the question is what you're covering, if it's movable, right? If it's very movable, then it could create a problem also, because then if you just move what you're covering, then you have the tent there. So is the halachic goes into the question that something that's not really tangible, not really solid, are you creating oil because it doesn't really count? So then imagine you covered the wood. Let's say the wood is not something that's considered solid. So if the wood wasn't there, then you created a tent. So it depends what you're covering. Not all coverings are equal. But let's see it inside. Why? Why is it like you're making a tent? Because the havik shtei mechitzas, that's the stones. The gagal gabeim, and you put the roof on top, which is the wood. You have to make it to do it in an unconventional way, which means you hold the wood in your hand. So not to create the stones and cover the stones with the wood, but to kind of put the wood and stones together where you're not creating a tense situation. Same too, if you have if you're out camping, to put a pot on top of the stones, it's also a tent, right? Because the pot covers the stones and you create that little space that's called, you tented the space. So you also have to kind of put the pot and the stones together. So it's not that there's walls and then you're putting a roof on top of the walls, because a tent is not just the way we understand a tent. A tent is any kind. It's like in the rules of Tuma. Part of the thing is the difference between placing something directly on top or creating an open space is not the same thing. Creating an open space means you make an oil, a tent. Putting something on top, you covered something. So your question about covering the wood, it's covering something. Depends. The question is if the wood is considered something or not. But if putting a pot on top of stones, even though it's only a few inches, but you created a tented space in that few inches. Okay, let's see the footnotes. The halacha applies only when the sides were set up on Yom Tov. So here he makes a point that if you put the stones on Yom Tov, they're on Yom Tov. So you created the mechitzas, you created the walls, even though they're small walls, right? Tiny walls of stones. If they were standing before Yom Tov, if you have a pit, a fire pit, right? That's what a fire pit is. It is permitted, so says the Rabbi Mishnah Berurah. So Mishnah Berurah says it's a difference. If you have a fire pit that's before Yom Tov, so you could put on top of it the wood. If the fire pit was created on Yom Tov, means the wood, the stones were put up on Yom Tov, so then you're making a full structure. Then it's not allowed. So that's a big difference, actually. Footnote number 26, because it says it looks like you're making a tent, even though you're not making a tent because you're making a fire. All right. Doesn't want to get too much more detail after that. Okay, now what about dealing with the fire? Okay, this is, of course, a question. Aaron says that his family does barbecues. So everyone knows part of barbecues is fanning the flames, etc. So he says, "Ein noifchem eish b'mafuach." He can't use a professional blower to fan the flames. Kadesh liyas kadesh sha'umin and so you shouldn't do it like professionals do it because again, that's not Yom Tiftik. But the custom is to have a home fanner means that you have professional equipment and you have home equipment, right? If you have a home equipment for fanning, so the custom is, he says, the oilam, you have to remember today, it's for us, the question is, what stove do you have? Back 100 years ago, 200 years, there was no stove. People made fires. So what kind of equipment you have? So if you have a home equipment, it's not the quality of a professional equipment, so then they use it. They shinu to use it in unconventional way. Lamata from above down. So they use the blower in an unconventional way, blowing from above down, which I guess is not the typical way. Better to do it from below up. But in a professional one, I feel they shinu even using the non-conventional way. Usr is forbidden. 27. He quotes the Shulchan Aruch. Now here comes the question of another question that Rebecca was referring to, maybe not directly, but other things that you're allowed or not allowed to do in Yom Tif, for instance, Boirer, right? So one of the things is, I wanted to check. Okay, so it says over here, I'll get to it in a second, my question. Mutter liver kitniyos mashu tzarich le'esayim. One of the things of legumes is that you have to kind of separate the shells and the bad parts from the good parts. So are you allowed to do the boirer of the kitnios on Yom Tif? Because maybe you could have done it before. Is that something that's a malacha? So he says you could do what you need for that day. Avaloi benapa v'loi b'kvara. But you can't use a sieve or a strainer to separate the good from the bad. Hold on, Rebecca. Also to put in the water, so then that either the good parts or the bad parts float. So if the bad parts float, you get rid of the bad parts. If the good parts float, you take the good parts. That's also not allowed on Yom Tif. You have to do it manually by hand. You have to do it manually by hand. You could choose what's easier, the easier way to do it by hand. But you have to do it by hand, not to do it by, sort of say mechanical, whatever, through the water. So if it's easier to take away the bad parts, then take away the bad parts. It's easier to take the good parts. You can take the good parts and eat, but you have to do it the non-conventional way. Yes, Rebecca.
So this is reminding me, like for Pesach, why do they always say that you have to wash the lettuce and the parsley, the maror, and make the salt water and everything before Yom Tov? Because
Based on these
why
rules.
can't? But didn't you just say that you can wash greens on Yom Tov?
Now here we're gonna see. Let's see the footnotes before. But the point is, this is something that you need for today. Here's not washing the greens. Here's talking about separating the beans, the legumes from the shell, the bad parts from the good parts. But checking on Yom Tov, the lettuce for bugs and all that stuff. That's something surely you could have done before Yom Tov.
You
Hold
just
on. Go
wait.
ahead,
Don't
Aaron.
you just say this? You just mentioned that you can't take the good from the bad and the bad from the good. Then
No,
you
you
can't use.
could. You could take the good from the bad, but you have to do it manually. You can't do it by soaking it in water.
Okay, so then how can you use a French press? Because you're pushing the beans down at the end, and then you're not manually taking
Okay,
it out with your hands.
okay. Okay, so that's a very good question. I think the reason is that you should be able to use it. Again, I don't like to learning the laws or not giving us any answers, but I don't want to say something that's not 100%. I'll check it again. But I think the difference is that's it's not for instance, when you're separating the legumes or taking this lettuce, all these things, these are things that it's a preparation for eating. Meaning to say that it's just getting it ready for the cooking. The way you make the coffee is by the French press. You're not the point of the French press is not to separate the beans from the water. That's how you cook coffee. Is that some people cook it in a pan, and the French press means you pour the hot water with the beans that cooks it, and part of the process is to get rid of the beans. It's still a good question. I'll have to make sure 100%. I think it's a little different because that's the process. That's how you're cooking it. It's in the process of cooking, not in the process of preparing for cooking. You understand the difference?
I understand what your difference is, but
I'll have to
you're
check.
separating.
I hear that what you're saying. Let me check, but I think but that's it's the I think the separating is the method of how it's being done. That's the only way to do it. Like separating the beans, it means the cooking is the cooked beans. You just don't want to cook the bad parts. Over
Yeah,
here
but let me
is
give you this. You said that I'm just using coffee as an example. There's many other examples, but my example with the coffee is you said you can't ground it, but according to some people, grinding the coffee is part of the.
no grounding the coffee is a preparation, and you use the ground beans in the coffee. Making if you can make, like I said, if a cold brew could be made before Yom Tov, it's something else. But if you're making a hot cup of coffee, and the way to do it is through the French press, the idea that's part of the process. Again, let me check. I want to double check on the French press. I'm almost sure that's part of the cooking process. But you're right. This is a question of butter. Let's see. This is over here. Let's see what he's saying in the footnotes over here. Maybe he'll give us some wisdom. He says over here, unlike Shabbos, when unless it is immediate use, even separating food from refuse is a melacha da'iraisa. On Yom Tov, separating boirer is a melacha da'iraisa only when separating grain from chaff, etc., which is usually done on a large scale. That's the French press is different than that, right? We're not doing large scale. So it says Shulchan Aruch. The Isuras Yaakov rules that separating two types of foods, even on Yom Tov, is permitted only for immediate use. Again, and according to some opinions, coffee is not a waste. It's also a food. So again, and you're doing immediate use, and you're not doing it for. You're not allowed to. You surely can't French press for pitchers and pitchers to put in the fridge. But if you for immediate use, something different. It seems like that would lean towards that. But I'm going to check it to be 100%. All right, footnote number 29, sieve strainer. Since usually the large quantity is separated with these utensils, it looks as though you're doing it for tomorrow's needs. Again, that doesn't apply to the French press. The French press, usually a person makes a French press for one glass of coffee or a few glasses of coffee that you're going to drink right now. The one that I have in my house is something that you could use for maybe one glass of coffee. So part of the problem with the sieve and all these things is because it looks like you're doing large amounts, but here it's obvious you're not doing large amounts. It's not what's being done, and like he says in footnote number 28, because this is the way it's done. It's usually done on mass, but coffee French press is never done on mass. Okay, footnote number 30. He says like this. Okay, that you can't soak the water. He says, but you have to pick off the refuse or the food from the float that floats. The Taz and Shulchan Aruch Rav say it's forbidden if you were able to do it before Yom Tov. Again, part of the question is, couldn't you have done it before Yom Tov? The Bir Halacha says, since you're not using a sieve, it is considered doing it in an unusual manner, and it is permitted even if you could have done it before Yom Tov. But in such a case, it's better to take the food from the refuse, and this is the prevailing custom. So again, it seems like that you could soak it in the water because it's something that's not your regular way of doing it. Well, let me just say it again. It's not talking about the water. But mow and separate by hand and pick whatever's easier. If it's easier to pick the refuse or pick the food out of the refuse. So the Shulchan Aruch Rav said this whole thing is forbidden to do if you could have done before Yom Tov. The Bir Halacha says you could do it even if you haven't done it before Yom Tov, but better to take the food out of the refuse. Okay. Now the question I had was, and I have to check this because I do it on Yom Tov, is to soak the beans for the cholent. Now, soaking the beans for the cholent, for the chamim, is not as a way of separating. It's not. I mean, the reason I do it. One of the reason I soak my beans before is you could wash the beans before. That's not a problem. But it's not just to get the bad parts out. That's not really what it's about. It's really about to soak the beans makes the beans much easier to cook. And also, if you make cholent, right, and you put barley and beans in, so you want to, if you soak the beans, then all that water that comes into the beans later happens now while you're soaking it, and it makes it easier to cook, to put the proper amount of water in and all that. So I think I have to check again, but I think that's permissible on Yom Tov because there you're not doing it's not about the separating. I mean, you could wash the beans. That's just washing the beans. You're putting the beans you're putting the beans in the water because that's the process of cooking it to soak the beans. It's not about the cleansing of it. I think that's permitted on Yom Tov. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. My wife's Middle Eastern, so we don't make cholent. I get it at the shul, but she makes a lot of bean dishes. Okay. So one of the things that they do is soak it and they do it before because you got to take out the dirty water because a lot of people have digestion problems and it makes you pass a lot of gas. But if you could get that foam that's on the top out after soaking it, then you have easier digestion and then you're separating. This is just tradition. She's always done it. If I ask her why she does it that way, she might not know. But using what I learned and what I see, they wouldn't do it on a yontif. They've had it already prepared. All you have to do is cook it then.
So they would soak it before Yom Tov. Let's say they're making beans on Yom Tov day, or let's say it's 3 day Yom Tov like Shabbos, and then they have to soak the
They
beans.
wouldn't cook it before then, but they would have it soaked already.
They would have it soaked. And what do they do with the beans afterwards? They put it in the fridge.
Yeah, because you have to make it digestible. And let's say you get a lot of gas after eating beans, but when you soak the beans, it gets rid of the parts of the bean that makes you gassy.
Yeah, I know that. So the thing is, the question is that if it can be done, if you can, if
I've
it's
never seen my wife soak beans
on Yom
over
Tov.
the yontif, but
Okay.
she will soak them before if she wants to have a bean dish.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm going to check into that because you can't. I mean, there's a limit to how long you could leave. You could leave wet beans out. Maybe I guess it depends.
No, but this is the thing. Once you cook it, then it's a whole nother story. So you could leave
No,
it a little longer.
Does she
they're not
cook
gonna.
it with a potato? It'll make it
What?
more digestible. Cook it with a potato. That's all you have to do.
Oh, that's another thing.
Yeah.
No,
Is that what she does?
No,
Yeah.
she never used a potato. I never heard of that. And the way he said it, it makes it also easier to
works.
cook.
Oh,
No,
no,
my
it makes it
question.
more digestible. That's what he
So
Yeah,
means.
it
that
also makes it more digestible. My question to you, Aaron, is your wife will soak it and leave it for 3 days in the fridge and it's fine to use?
no,
That makes a
she'll
difference.
soak it and then she'll soak it and leave it. No, she'll soak it and then she cooks it and then she can add different things to it
Okay,
depending on how she wants it.
that's different. But cholent, you don't want to make cholent on Wednesday. If I
No,
soak
no,
my
no, no, no.
if I soak my beans on one, if I soak my beans on Wednesday, and I drained it before, because you're saying the problem is the draining, right? To separate the bad parts, the bad dirty waters and the
Right.
gassy waters. So then what are you doing with the beans for 3 days?
It'll be cooked.
No, so if it's not cooking, you want to cook it on Erev Shabbos. That's what I'm saying.
So
After
you might cook it one day before. So it's not going to sit 3 days, but I've had it sit 3, 4, 5 days after it's cooked.
after
So
after it's cooked, that's different. But making a cholent, usually you make it. I want to check on that.
it
But I hear
sat a few days in the refrigerator before she cooked it. And it's navy
after,
beans, actually.
after it's drained from the waters.
Yeah, she's had it in there for at least 2 days. Now, I don't know, 3 days because usually gone. We've eaten it.
Let me check into about the chant. Yes, Barbara.
I was just going to say, I've never heard of potatoes making beans more digestible. When I was growing up, and if we burnt the days, my mother would have us put a piece of potato in there. That would take away the burnt flavor, the burnt taste.
The burnt or the salt. Also, if you over salt something, if you throw a potato in, it does miracles. All right. Any other questions before we close up tonight's class?
Yeah, just one quick little question. When you say, I'm not mentioning anything about this topic, but when you say you're going to research, how do you do
Yeah.
the research and where do you go? Because maybe we want to do some of it as well.
I check in the different Chabad. I go through the different Chabad options that I have, either through the Shulchan Aruch Harav or other options to see that I could check, or Rabbi Farkash's books on Yom Tov and Shabbos that I have. But you could check out. You could check. I mean, again, checking online, you always have to be careful because it's not always accurate, depending who's giving you. But if you check online on a website like the OUK or the Chabad.org, that would be fine. So I just wanted to go before we finish. What did we want to check? We wanted to check on the beans. We wanted to check on the French press. Anything else we wanted to check on?
This is from a different class, but I think from the Motzei Shabbos class, but about
You're
if
breaking up.
you can use Hashem's name when you sing Zmiros.
Zmiris and Hashem's name. Okay.
Thank
I think,
you.
I think tonight we had something else, but we have the beans and the French press. We'll leave it at that. All right. Oh, you wanted to ask about the wood. What did you say about the wood?
I said the wood where I put
Yeah,
a
I'm
I put
confident.
a tarp over the wood.
I don't think that's a problem, but I'll check. Lila Tov, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.